thanks. We will commence our study today from the book of Genesis as we continue a verse by verse study in the book of Genesis. Anybody remember where we left off? Is anybody following along?
41,
Chapter 41. But is anybody reading ahead? I don't know. Sometimes I'm up here and I'm asking myself the question if anybody's following along. All right. So we are in Genesis chapter 41. Bless the Lord. We will pick up there as we continue in our time of studying. Today we bow our heads in prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you for allowing us to be here another time in your house. Lord, we are so gracious to you, O God, for your kindness, your love, and your mercies towards us. We thank you for the breath of life in our being. Thank you, Lord God, for your faithfulness today, even as we open up the holy word of God. Feed us, O God, help us so that we will become hungry and thirsty for the word of God. I pray, O God, you will heal our bodies, our soul, our mind, our spirit, even as we open up the holy word of God today. In the name of your Son, Yeshua, we ask these favors. Amen. Bless the Lord. So we are continuing in Genesis chapter 41. I think we started reading from the first verse last week, but we didn't get too far. So I'll just pick up from the first verse. And it said, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored cows and fat, and they fed in the meadow. So here we see that Pharaoh was having a dream. And as we said last week, the Most High God, he was communicating to the Egyptians through dreams. And we saw where the butler and the baker of Pharaoh had dreams when they were in prison. And both of them, Joseph gave them the interpretation of the dream that the butler and the baker had. And remember that Joseph gave the butler, he gave him a message to pass to Pharaoh, to tell Pharaoh that he was in prison. He was stolen from Africa, was it that? He was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and he was in prison for something that he was accused of, something that he did not commit. And he was appealing to Pharaoh so that he can be delivered, he can be set free from the dungeon that he was in. And we went on last week that the butler totally forget Joseph, and Joseph was there in prison for another 2 years. So this is 30 years. Joseph is about 30 years old at the time. He already spent, that will be 11 and 2, that is 13 years. Joseph is in captivity for 13 years. He is in slavery for 13 years. And here we see that it tells us that Pharaoh, he is having a dream. Pharaoh, as we said, he is the Pharaoh of the land of Egypt. And Egypt was the oldest country that had a Pharaoh. No other country had Pharaoh. And as we said last time, all of the pharaohs, they were black people. They were black men. And sometimes people, they don't want to say it too loud. Don't say that too loud, because that is going to upset people. But we have to understand that Egypt, it was in ancient time, it was a black civilization. And the inhabitants of Egypt, it was Egypt and Nubia, which is modern-day Sudan. They were linked together. Because when you look at a map, you'll see Egypt is just north of modern-day Sudan. And back in ancient time, those two countries was linking together. And at one time you find that the pharaohs might be a Nubian, or sometimes you find that the pharaoh might be an Egyptian. Because those two countries, they used to run, the two of them used to run together, but sometimes they go separately, and sometimes they fight against each other. So this is what we are saying, that the Pharaoh was black people. Right. Amen. And Egypt was a black civilization. And we see that Joseph is in Egypt and he's a slave in Egypt for 13 years. He was sold into captivity by his brothers, and he interpreted the dream of those two servants of the Pharaoh. And here we see that he was waiting for 2 years. He was waiting, expecting that the butler was going to recommend him to Pharaoh, because he had already interpreted the dream of the butler. The butler was restored to his original position. And here we see that the butler was restored, but he did not remember Joseph. And here we see that it was not the time for Joseph to be delivered. Right. And we talk about, remember we were talking about people who can show you favors, and people can pull a string for you and help you to get into a different position. It was not the will of God for this butler to represent Joseph to Pharaoh and recommend that Pharaoh should release Joseph from prison. So therefore, the Most High God, in his own time, he decided that he's going to bring Joseph out of prison when the time is right. So the time wasn't right for Joseph to get out of prison, so he spent another 2 years in prison. And here we see that it tells us that the Pharaoh had a dream. And the dream that the Pharaoh is having here, Pharaoh, in his dream, he see himself, behold, he stood by the river. And this is the Nile. This is the Nile that Pharaoh is standing by. The Nile was, it was the source of Egypt. It was the source of the economy of Egypt. And here we see that the Pharaoh, in his dream, he's standing by the Nile. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored cows and fat. So these cows came up out of the river, and he said that they were well-favored, meaning that they were good-looking, they were healthy, and they were fat, and they were they were feeding by the meadow. So these cows, they were looking good, they were looking healthy, good-looking cows, healthy cows, fat cows. But the thing is, they were still feeding. I guess maybe that probably relates to some of us. We are already heavy, but we still eating it. The cows were looking good, they were fat, but they were still eating. And what one interpreter is saying here is that back in Egypt in that time, because the weather used to be so hot, the cows, these animals, they used to go into the Nile River to cool themselves off. So they will go into the river to cool off themselves, and at times you'll see them coming back out. So in Pharaoh's dream, this was the picture that he was having here. He was seeing these cows coming out of the Nile River, and as they came out of the river, they stood on the riverbank, and they were feeding on the grass. Because the Nile, when the Nile overflow, the Nile have rich soil that it will, overflow the banks, and on the banks of the Nile, in the middle, around the Nile area, these animals will be there eating, because the vegetation and the grass and all of these things is so rich that there's so much, food for these animals to feed on. So this is what Pharaoh is seeing in his dream. And as he said in verse 3, and behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and thin, and stood by the other cows upon the banks of the river. So here we see that after these 7 cows came up, they were good-looking, healthy, and they were feeding on the grass by the meadow there. Here we see 7 other cows came up out of the Nile River. And this last 7 cows, they were ugly, they were thin, they wasn't looking good, and they wasn't healthy. And they came up and they stood next to these 4 set of cows that was fat and, feeding along the banks of the river. And it tells us, and in verse 4, and the ill-favored and thin cows did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. So Pharaoh's watching, is like he's having a nightmare. That's a bad dream. Because usually cows don't eat cows. Cows supposed to eat grass. But here we see that these are ill-favored cows. They eat up, they swallow up. It's like I remember with Moses, when Moses went before Pharaoh, and he and Aaron, and told Pharaoh that the Most High God said to let his people go free. And Moses pull out his rod and throw it on the ground as a sign, and the rod turned into a snake. And what happened is that the Egyptian magicians, they were able to do things too. So they get their rod and they throw their rod on the ground, and their rod turned into a snake. Anybody remember what happened? Moses' rod swallow up the snake, or the rods of Pharaoh's magician. The rod which turned to a snake, swallow up their snake. So here we see that these ill-favored, ugly-looking, hungry-looking cows, they swallow up these fat cows. And Pharaoh awoke. Now, we will find that later on, Pharaoh is going to add something here. He's going to add, when he explained the dream to Joseph, he's going to add to it in his explanation that after these ill-favored cows swallow up these fat cows, after they eat them up, they were still looking as if they didn't eat anything. And this is not mentioned here, but later on, you'll find that this is going to mention, and we'll talk about that later. So it says that Pharaoh awoke from all of his sleep. So after he saw that, I guess that was like a bad dream, and he frightened him so much that he jumped up out of his sleep, and I guess he probably went to the washroom. He just tried to get himself together. Went to the washroom, I guess, then he went back into his bed again. And in verse 5 say, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, plump and good. So this was not unusual in Egypt, because Egypt, the soil in Egypt was rich. And 7 ears of corn coming up on one stalk, that was probably a common thing. So, this was not unusual in Egypt because they have very rich soil. But it says that in verse 6, and behold, 17 ears blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. So right after them, we see that 7 ears came up also. And remember the first set of corn, or ears of corn that came up, it came up on one stalk. But here we see, it seems as though that these, the last set here came up by themselves. They came up single file. They were by themselves, come up on, they wasn't on one stalk. And they came up individually on their own stalk. And it says in verse 7, and the 17 ear devoured the 7 plump and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So here we see that it is something similar to what he saw with these ill-favored cows that eat up the fat cows. The dream is being repeated here. And here we see that Pharaoh is seeing that these ill-favored looking ears of corn devour. He didn't say that they swallow. They devour up those plump, fat ears of corn. And I think it probably is telling us here that I don't think that these ill-favored corn eat the fat corn. I think what happened, they probably drown them out, maybe they overgrow them, maybe they the ill-favored one, like it's stifle out these well-favored corn, and that caused them to be devoured, or like it killed them. But I don't think he actually, because he didn't use swallow up. This in the first section with the cow, he said that the tin cows swallow up the fat cows. But here he said that the ill-favored, the tin ears of corn devour the 7 plump full ears. So I'm thinking that because it said it came with a dry force of wind, very hot and dry force of wind came up with these two large set of corn, and it devoured those well-favored corn that came up before. And behold, it said that and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. You know, you ever have that kind of experience, you know, you're dreaming and you're having a bad dream, and then you jump out of your sleep, sometimes you're fighting to get out of your sleep, and then you know, eventually you wake up. You know, you ever struggle? Sometimes I struggle in my sleep with some of these dreams. You know, especially sometimes my dream would take me way back in St. Vincent when I was growing up. And these watchmen, you know, chasing you on the estate. You know, somebody running you from off their bamboo tree, you know, off their orange tree. And or somebody have a dog, a big bad dog running behind you. And you're running like hell. And, you know, you're trying to wake up, but you can't. And you suddenly wake up out of your sleep, and you probably run out and go to the washroom, and you go back online again, and the dream starts all over again. And this is what Pharaoh was happening. This is what was happening to Pharaoh here. So when he awoke, you know, he was glad that it was a dream. He realized that it wasn't real. This wasn't real because it seemed as though this thing was so real to him. When he saw the fat cows came up and the tin one eat up the fat cows, that was like something that was happening in reality to him. And now he's seeing these tin ears of corn eating up the fat ears of corn. This looked like real, but when he awoke, he realized that it's not real, it's a dream. But that it didn't say there. And it says that in verse 8, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. So even though when Pharaoh awoke and he realized that it was a dream, he was still troubled. He was still tormented. You know, the dream troubled him. He realized that this wasn't an ordinary dream. There is something else to it. Because as we said before, Egyptians, they believe in dreams. And Pharaoh, he is seeing this as a message. And he's seeing it as a message from the gods. I don't think he realized that it was the Most High God who was communicating to him at this particular time. He was seeing it as the God that he worshipped. But later on, as we will see, he will acknowledge that this dream came from the Most High God. So he was troubled, and you know, when he got up in the morning, the scripture is saying here that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh got up in the morning, and you know, because he didn't forget the dream. You know, sometimes you have a bad dream and you get up in the morning time and you know you can't remember it, and sometimes you're struggling to remember the dream. And but this wasn't the case here. When Pharaoh got up, Pharaoh remembered the dream. He knew exactly what he saw. The both dreams, he remembered them. So what he did, he called for the magicians of Egypt, because these magicians, they were trained. And when we talk about magicians here, we're not talking about modern day magicians. These guys that dress up in their tuxedo and they have on the black hat, and they will take off their hat and they will pull rabbits out of their hat. You know, that's not the kind of magician that we're talking about. These magicians in ancient times, these were well-trained men. They were highly educated. It was the brightest people in Egypt at the time. These men were trained in astrology. They were trained in science. And these men were highly trained. And they had the skills how to interpret dreams. And that is the reason why when these two officials of Pharaoh, when they was in jail, they were so worried because they was in jail and they didn't have any access to these dreams interpreter because they were in prison. And that's where Daniel came in. But the Pharaoh, he had access to these guys who can interpret dreams. And he called them in. Amen. What verse was that? Yes. So he called in the magicians. And you know, sometimes when we look at these guys, because of the fact that they are, you know, Egyptians and they are black people, and you talk about magicians, the first thing will come to some people's mind is that these men were ogre men.
Yeah.
First thing they think, well, he calling the ogre men. These men wasn't, it wasn't like, voodoo. Those guys that operate in voodoo and they, cut off the animal's head and stuff like that, use blood and all that. No, this is not the kind of thing that is happening here. This is highly trained men, highly educated men. It's like when the Bible talks about the 3 wise men, not 3, talk about the wise men. It wasn't 3. Yeah, let me just correct myself there. It's not 3 wise men. It's more like 300. But those wise men that came and looked for Christ, the Messiah, it wasn't 3. And the reason why people say it was 3 is because they presented 3 different gifts to Joseph and Mary and the baby Yeshua. So they said it's 3. Yes, you put your hand up.
Yeah. Why did they give them that name? Why did they give them that name?
Magicians? Well, that word I think is magi, wise men, magicians. And, that's the reason why I'm saying it doesn't mean that they were like modern day magicians or modern day witchcraft workers. They were scientists. These men were scientists.
Yeah.
These men were philosophers. Yeah. These men, they were astrologers. They were trained in all of these different science. They were trained. So these men, they were really able to interpret dreams because that's the reason why the Pharaoh had them. That was the best kind of a talent that the Pharaoh had. To have a job like that, you have to know your business. And these men, they were successful in whatever they were doing. But here we see this time that the Pharaoh called them in, and the Pharaoh had this dream, and he called in the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. So all the wise men, it's like, you remember during the time of Daniel, we have a similar situation where Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar and all of these guys, when they have their dreams and they need interpretation, we have the handwriting on the wall and all of these things was going on in the book of Daniel. They were calling all of these magicians and wise men of Babylon, and they had the same problem too. They couldn't interpret the dream. Although these men were highly intelligent men, and at the time, they still couldn't interpret. It was Daniel who gave the interpretation of the handwriting on the wall, and also Nebuchadnezzar when he saw the vision, when he saw that statue. Remember the statue that he saw? And Daniel was the one that gave the interpretation to those things. So here we see that these magicians of Egypt, they also were well trained. But when Pharaoh called them in and told them his dream, there was none that could interpret them to Pharaoh. So these men couldn't interpret the dreams. These 2 dreams, which was one, they couldn't interpret these dreams to Pharaoh. And these men, they were trained, they were highly intelligent men. But, something that I'm looking at, as I look at these 2 dreams that Pharaoh is having here, I'm not a magician. I'm not a dream interpreter. But when you look at the dream, and you see 7 fat cows come up from out of the Nile River, and then you have 7 thin, ugly, hungry-looking cows came up and eat up those fat cows, and then you see 7 fat, full ears of corn came up on one stalk, and then you see those 7 thin ears came up and they devour the 7 fat ears. By just using common sense, you can just see that have to do with some kind of hunger or starvation or some kind of famine. You can just look and see that, by just looking at it, I'm just saying I'm using my understanding and looking at that, I can see, well, this likely involves some kind of famine or some kind of, famine is coming. But yes, some kind of hardship is coming. But what we are seeing here is that these trained magicians, and I believe this is the first time they ever failed Pharaoh. I believe this is the first time these men ever go before Pharaoh or anybody for that matter, have something to interpret, and these men couldn't give an answer. And I believe the reason for that is because the Most High God seems to hide the interpretation of these 2 dreams from these magicians. And I think there's a part in, I think it's 1 Corinthians, where the Bible tells us that the Lord said he's going to destroy the wisdom of the wise, and he's going to bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. He's going to make the understanding of the prudent man that's supposed to be wise, he's going to make his understanding become as nothing. And here we see for his own purpose, for the purpose of the Most High God, so that his words can be fulfilled. He allows some kind of darkness or some cloud to come over the insight, the discernment that these men used to have. Because see, this was a spiritual dream. It was a spiritual message that the Most High God is giving here. And as the Bible said that the natural man can't understand spiritual things. So these magicians, they were natural men. They were not spiritual. And this was a spiritual interpretation. So therefore, because these men were natural men, they couldn't interpret this dream, because this was a spiritual dream that comes from the Most High God. So therefore, they didn't have any answer. Yes?
Is that the mic there? Well, if you could look at something else similar to that of Joseph's situation with the Pharaoh.
Right.
If you read in Daniel,
right,
where Nebuchadnezzar dreamed a dream, right, and then he was telling the magicians and all that stuff that the dream was gone from him.
Right.
Although I don't think he really meant that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually knew what the dream was,
right,
but he refused to tell them because he wants them to
right,
tell him what the dream is and
right,
the interpretation. So, and even if he did, I don't think those wise men would have been able to interpret the dream, because it was a spiritual dream, as you said, that came from God.
Right.
And only God alone can, and he was the one who revealed to Daniel the king's dream.
Yeah, but Pharaoh was not trying to trick these wise men here. I agree with what he said, that Nebuchadnezzar or Belshazzar, one of those guys, they were trying to prove these wise men whether or not they were lying, because he didn't. I don't believe that he forget the dream. He remembered the dream, but he was just trying to test them. It's like today when some of these so-called prophets and that we have in the church today, they will tell you something, and then when you look in your life, you see there is nothing like that. You never have any kind of experience like that. And there's some people who are gutsy enough. It's only some of us who are not gutsy, but you have gutsy people out there who will, when one of these so-called prophets give them a prophecy and tell them about something, the Lord is going to bless you, the Lord is going to do that, or whatever. They're going to question them on it and tell me, give me more information and talk to me more about that. And then some of them, when they notice that what the prophet or the so-called prophet is saying is not something coming from the Lord, they will call them out. Amen. So maybe that was something that was happening during the time of Daniel. But we see here, Pharaoh is not trying to trick these men. These men, the magicians of Pharaoh, Pharaoh told them the dream. But it seems as though they didn't have no words to say. Yes.
Didn't you mention last week that the Egyptians, I guess they were more spiritually attuned,
right, to dreams
and stuff like that than anybody else.
Right.
So I'm guessing, as you said, that God, somehow managed to block their spiritual intuitions.
Right.
They won't be able to understand or interpret the dream.
Right.
So even though they were spiritual, even though they were more closer in spirituality, right, they weren't still able to interpret the dream.
Well, this dream wasn't something that God didn't allow them to interpret this. The Most High God didn't want Pharaoh magicians to interpret these two dreams. I think the Lord set this up so that the cupbearer could remember Joseph, because we're going to see that. Right. This is where Joseph is going to come in, and nothing will happen before it's time. Okay. Joseph tried to force it, Yeah. Joseph tried to force his deliverance. And that is what I was trying to say last time. Joseph tried to hurry up.
Yeah. Get out of it.
Sometimes, I wish if God could hurry up at times when he's dealing with me. I don't know if it's I alone feel that way. Sometimes, you're waiting on the Lord and you're crying out to the Lord for something. I just wish if the Lord could just speed up a little bit. And it's the same thing that Joseph was experiencing here. Joseph wanted the Most High God to speed up his release. But that wasn't what the Most High God wanted. God, he operates on his own terms, on his own time, and we can't force the hand of God. So here we see that this is what the Most High God, he set it up in this way so that Pharaoh is going to have these dreams and his interpreters can't interpret the dream. So therefore, that is where Joseph is going to come in. Amen. So here we see in verse 9. No, we don't know there. Where are we?
Okay, go back.
Yeah, so none of the interpreters of Pharaoh can interpret the dream. Then spoke the chief butler to Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my fault this day. So he said, listen, I messed up. He just remembered his fault this day. And what he's saying here, I messed up, and when I got out of prison, I should have revealed this to you. This is what he's trying to say here. I delay or I make a mistake, and he is remembering what he was experiencing when he was in jail. He said to Pharaoh, I do remember my fault this day. Otherwise, in other words, what he's saying, I remember when I was in jail. I remember my situation in jail. What happened to me? And I guess his mind just immediately focused back on Joseph. All the time, I know he probably didn't remember Joseph. But now that Pharaoh have a dream, and Pharaoh needs somebody to interpret his dream, now is the time, now is the right time, the opportune time that the Most High God want the butler to remember Joseph. Who knows? Last time we said that the butler probably was ungrateful. But just like how we say that the Most High God hide this interpretation from the Egyptian interpreters, who knows? Maybe the Most High God probably just allowed this butler, his memory in regards to what Joseph said to him, probably just vanished, because that wasn't the right time for him to present it to Pharaoh. But now is the right time. Now is the right time. So he said in verse 10, behold, he said, Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. So he's telling Pharaoh what happened. Pharaoh, remember when he put me in jail, he was angry with me, and he put me and the baker in ward in the captain of the guard's house. So here we see we are coming back to Potiphar. And remember when Joseph was put in this same prison, and we said that the prison was in Potiphar's house. The prison was Potiphar, his house where he was living, where Joseph was accused of trying to rape his wife. It was in the same compound where the prison was. And that is where Joseph was. I remember that Joseph, he was placed in charge of the prison also. So that is why when he was back there dealing with this, we were saying that Joseph, the punishment that Potiphar was supposed to give to Joseph, he didn't really give the full punishment to him. Because, Potiphar had the authority at that time to execute Joseph. Because he was the chief executioner in Egypt at that time. But he didn't do that. He put him in charge of the prison. So here again we have confirmation that this was the same place where Potiphar was staying. So he said in verse 9 at the end, both me and the chief baker, in verse 11, and we dream a dream in one night, and I and he, meaning the butler and the baker, we dream each man according to the interpretation of his dream. So what he's saying is that each of us have our own dream, and each of us, we get our own interpretation. And in verse 12, and there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream, he did interpret. So here we see that the butler is remembering Joseph. And here we see he called him a young man. And he said a Hebrew servant. So he made mention of Joseph here, and he called Joseph a Hebrew servant. And I need to explain because there's a lot here involved. Now, when we talk about Hebrew only exists during that time. The Hebrew nation, or when we talk about Hebrews, or the Hebrew people, it started with Abraham. Abraham was the first one that was referred to as a Hebrew. And I think what some interpreters are saying is that Hebrew came from the word Ibar. That's what they're saying. These guys are trained in the language, the original language. So in that time, it was only Hebrews who were existing. We didn't have what we call today, we call Jews. Nobody didn't know anything about Jews. Even the person from which they get the interpretation Jews, because Jews came from Judea. And the reason why they have this word Jews today is from Judea or Judah or Yehuda. Because back in that time they didn't have any, even now, when you, if you get one of those King James 16:11 Bibles, yesterday I was looking into my King James 16:11. That's the original King James Bible. And you will see when it comes to Jews, they don't have any J. They didn't have any J because the letter J only existed for about maybe 400 or 500 years. So therefore, in the original King James Bible, they're not going to spell it out like how we have it spelled out today. Jews. Instead of putting a J, they're going to put an I. And it's just like, you're not going to find words like Jesus in the original King James Bible. When they come to that, they will put an I also. So what I'm trying to explain is that even the person that they get the name from Jews or Judah, he didn't know about Jews. Judah was not a Jew. Judah was a Hebrew, or Judah was an Israelite. And they only bring this word Jews into existence because of what took place during the time of, after the death of King David. Solomon took over, his son also took over from King Solomon, and King Solomon's son didn't want to listen to good counsel, and he tried to place heavy burden on the people, and the people revolt against him. And there was a separation. And all this take place close to 1,000 years after the time of Abraham. There was a separation, and the kingdom was divided. And we have two of the tribes, which was Judah and Benjamin. They were to the south, and we have 10 tribes to the north. So what happens is that those 10 tribes to the north, they go into captivity. I think it was the Assyrian came in and conquered those 10 tribes and spread them all over the empire where they were ruling and scattered God's people. And then I think it's Nebuchadnezzar, he came in and he took into captivity the two tribes to the south. They went into captivity. And after, let me just back up. When they have this division, those 10 tribes to the north, they call themselves Israel. And those to the south, the two tribes to the south, they call themselves Judea. So that's where Judah came in, or Jews. And from Judah, we get what we call today Jews. But in the time of Abraham, there was no Jews. In the time of Abraham, there were Hebrew Israelites. And when we talk about Hebrew Israelite, or the Hebrews, there is no clear definition in the Bible or in historical writing where it tells us what the color of the Hebrews was. It's very sketchy. If you're trying to find what color the Hebrew Israelite was, it's kind of sketchy. But what we have, the concrete evidence that we have is that the Bible shows us that the Egyptians and the Hebrew Israelite people, they were the same complexion. And there's so many places in the Bible where the Bible will show us where a Hebrew Israelite person is mistaken for an Egyptian. Okay, those of us from St. Vincent, suppose somebody mistakenly identify you as a Jamaican. Why do you think they identify you as a Jamaican? It's because you look like Jamaican. You may not talk like Jamaican, you know, but you look like Jamaican. Because all of us, we are from the same stock. Jamaicans and Vincentian, Trinidadians, all of the Caribbean islands, Grenadians, we all came from the same stock. So we all tend to look alike. When on my job, where I work, we have a lot of Jamaican brothers working there. And, you know, they're all tall, just like me, big, muscular, strong guys, just like me. You know, and sometimes some people, especially European people, they tend to see all of us as alike. You know, so it's hard to make a distinction between Jamaicans and Vincentian. And that's the reason why here in Canada, the more European more tend to call all black people Jamaicans, especially if they know you from the Caribbean. They call everybody Jamaicans. So what I'm saying is that the way how we know that the Hebrew Israelite people, they were not European, is because the Bible identified them as looking like the Egyptians. And we haven't, you see, I'm trying to get you guys to check these things out. When you check the Bible, you will see that Moses, when Moses was taken, you remember when Moses, when he killed the security officer, the police officer in Egypt, and he ran away because the Pharaoh wanted us to kill him. He ran out and he got into the desert. He met up with Jethro. Jethro, he was a descendant also of Abraham through Keturah. And Jethro's daughter was by the well. They were there trying to water their father's flock. And some men was there harassing them. And Moses came, and Moses he chased away those men and helped these girls to water their flock. When they went back home, their father asked them, because these men always harassing them and it take time for them to water their flock. But that day, it seems as though they went home extra early. And their father asked them, how come you're home so early? What did they say? They said, an Egyptian help us. Who was Moses? Moses was a Hebrew Israelite man. And according to the European interpreter, he's supposed to be a white man. He's supposed to be a European. But here we see that Jethro's daughter, who was relative to Moses, because they also was half Hebrew Israelite. And they mistakenly identified Moses as an Egyptian. So we see that the evidence in the Bible where Egyptians and Hebrew Israelite people are the same complexion people. Also, we're gonna study with Joseph again. We're gonna see that Joseph, when his brothers came down into Egypt to buy food, they couldn't recognize him. They couldn't recognize him, and the reason why they couldn't recognize him is because Joseph and the Egyptians were looking alike. They were same kind of color people. And they were looking alike. Also, you can take it a little bit further. You remember when even Moses, when Moses was born, the Pharaoh was killing Hebrew Israelite babies. And Miriam, the sister of Moses, Moses' mother and Miriam, they put together that basket, put Moses in the basket, float him down the river. And Moses is supposed to be a European. Moses is supposed to be a European white baby. And Pharaoh at the time looking to kill a white baby. And here we see that the Egyptian princess, Pharaoh's daughter, come out on the Nile River with her servants to take a bath or whatever she was doing. And when she was there, this basket was floating down the river. And here she saw that there was a European baby in it. White baby, and she take that white baby that her father looking for. Her father looking to kill that white baby and took it into her house. And Moses, that was Moses. Moses grew up in the house of the Pharaoh as a white European man. And the black Egyptian Pharaoh couldn't figure it out. He never realized that his adopted son, living in his house for 40 years, that was the people that he was looking to kill. Anybody understand what I'm trying to say? It doesn't match up. And according to the lawyers of O.J. Simpson, If it doesn't fit, you have to acquit. It doesn't fit. Yes, you gotta throw it out. So what I'm trying to say is that, this belief that we have today, that the Jewish people today, the so-called Jewish people today, they are the chosen people of God. It doesn't match up. And that's the reason why every time I come to it in the Bible, any time I come to any reference that talk about that, even though you guys might feel tired hearing me say it, I'm going to say it because the truth is going to set us free. So here we see that the butler here identified, which verse am I? 11. And, okay, yes, verse 12. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew servant to the captain of the guard. So this is a Hebrew servant. This is Joseph. Joseph is the first Hebrew Israelite from the tribe, from the family of Jacob that go down to live into Egypt. Because this is in fulfillment to what the Most High God said to Abraham, that his descendant is going to spend 400 years in a land in which they're going to be a stranger. And they're going to be enslaved by these people for a period of 400 years. Let me ask you a hard question. You think European could undergo 400 years of slavery? Come on, tell me. Come on, be truthful.
With the whip and everything?
You think European people could, in Egypt, can European people go through 400 years of slavery in a country like Egypt, where the sun, the weather in Egypt, the heat in Egypt, it is more hot than what we have in the Caribbean? You think they can undergo 400 years of slavery? Look at what is taking place right now in Israel. These people, they went in there in mass numbers from 1948. And right now, Israel have the highest rate of melanoma cancer. Had it not been that the Israeli government bringing in people on a daily basis, the people that they bring in from the beginning, and if they wasn't bringing in on a daily basis, all of those people are already dead because the weather killing them. They're developing that melanoma cancer. And the original people, the Palestinian people who most people hate, and most people put all the blame on them, and most people always Israel, and we have to support Israel, and the Palestinian, we give them all the blame. The original people who was there, the Palestinian people, they're not suffering with no melanoma cancer. It's because they originate from there. It's the same thing in Australia today, where we have the European people go into Australia and take over Australia from our Aboriginal ancestors, our family in Australia. Australia have the highest rate of melanoma cancer in the world. And the black people who live over there, they're not suffering with melanoma cancer because they originate from there. So who the land belongs to? Yeah, but that's the way. See, we are afraid. You see, what I'm finding today, a lot of us as black people, we are too chicken. When it comes to speaking the truth, when it comes to standing up for something, especially when it involves European, we are so chicken, we don't want to say nothing, we don't want to offend nobody. We should stay quiet, and we should just say it, but don't say it too loud. But the truth is the truth, and the truth is going to set us free. Anyway, we try to move on. I feel better getting that out of my chest. Amen. Praise the Lord. So in verse 12, he said, and there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream, he did interpret. And in verse 13, and it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored to my office, and him he hanged. So what the butler is saying here, Joseph, whatever he told them, the interpretation that he gave to them, it came to pass. It was reality. Because the butler, he was restored to his original position, but the baker, he was hanged. So Joseph, he gave the true interpretation. This wasn't anything fake. And that's the reason why the time is right for him to highly recommend Joseph to Pharaoh. So in verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph. and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his clothes and came into Pharaoh. So here we see the time is right for Joseph to come out of prison. And you see what it said here? When Pharaoh called Joseph, they brought him hastily. He hastily came out from prison. Brethren, when our time for deliverance come, it's going to happen fast. It's going to happen hastily. And wherever we are, we have to just be patient. I know it's not easy when you're suffering. When you're suffering, you want to get deliverance quick. But a lot of times, God will work on our time schedule. And we have to be patient with the Lord. The Bible tells us that the Lord, there is no temptation. He has taken us. But that which is common to man. But the Lord is faithful, who will not allow us to be tempted above that we are able to bear. But he will, with the temptation, make a way of escape. So Joseph came out from the dungeon. He came out speedily. And what he said, they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. They hurried because Pharaoh needed him. Pharaoh needed an interpreter. And he shaved himself and changed his clothes and came into Pharaoh. Now, there are some European interpreters. They try to twist this part of the verse to make it look like it is talking about modern-day Jewish people. So what they said is that Egyptians, they were clean-shaven. They tried to say that Egyptians never used to carry beard. They don't have a lot of hair on the skin. They're smooth skin. And Jewish people, they hairy skin. So what they're trying to say is that Joseph, because back in that time, they're trying to tell us that it was a disrespectful thing for a Hebrew person, which Joseph was the only Hebrew in Egypt at that time. It was disrespectful for a Hebrew with hair on his skin, bearded, going in before an Egyptian. That was a sign of disrespect. So they're trying to say that, they're trying to show it as if, well, it was really Jewish people. And because Jewish people tend to have beard and hairy-like looking, they're trying to say that Joseph, he was just like them. So what he did, to comply and to not disrespect the Egyptian, he called for a razor, he called for a razor blade and equipment so he could shave up himself, because he don't want to go in before the Pharaoh to disrespect the Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh and all of his people are clean shaven, and this one European white boy going in before them, he wants to please them, so he's going to cut off the beard, cut off the hair on his face. But I don't think so. It is just common practice. Right. Even today, the worst criminal you have in jail, if you have a court hearing and you have to go before the judge, they are going to shave him up. They're going to make sure that he's shaved up. They're going to put on a suit on him. They're going to put on tie on him, and carry him before the judge, because he's going before an elected official. And Pharaoh was a sovereign. Pharaoh was the ruler of Egypt. Right. And, taking somebody from the dungeon and taking them before Pharaoh, you have to make sure that you clean them up. It wasn't Joseph. I don't think it was Joseph who requested to be clean, to be shaven. The person who was in charge of the prison, they know that if somebody is going before Pharaoh, they have to clean up the person. Right. Could you imagine if the head of the prison allowed Joseph to go in before Pharaoh in dirty clothes, unshaven? What was going to happen to that person? He might have lost his head. So it was just regular custom. This don't have nothing to being a person is Jewish and because they have hairy skin. You never see black African people with hairy skin. You never see people from different parts of black nation where some of them have smooth skin. Some black people smooth skin. Some black people hairy skin. So I don't know, that's why I'm trying to say that these people, they just twist. They twist these things so that they could fulfill their own agenda. And that is the reason why we need to study the Bible. And listen, studying the Bible doesn't need a little bit of common sense. You don't have to go to no Bible seminary to be able to study the Bible. Some people think that to study the Bible, you have to go to the Bible seminary and listen to these people. When you go into the Bible seminary, if you don't careful, some of these guys, when they start teaching you some of the things that they believe, when you come out, you might not even want to believe in God anymore. Because, when you go into the Bible seminary, it depends on where you go. Some of these guys, they will teach you and they teach you against the resurrection. They don't believe in the resurrection. Some of them, they don't believe that the full gospel was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What they say is that each gospel is nameless. They didn't have no name. And it's years after they decided to put Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John name on these gospels. They will tell you in this seminary that the Apostle Paul, all the books, it is recorded that Paul probably wrote 13 books. And what they did, they brought these books down to about 6. And when you talk about like Peter, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, they said Peter didn't write those books. That is the things that most of these scholars, that is the thing that they teach when you go into these Bible colleges. So if you go into these things for higher education, and you are not grounded, you don't know, as the Bible says, I know whom I believe, and I'm persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. When you go into some of these colleges, you will come out and you're not going to even want to go to church anymore. So you don't need to go to Bible college to understand the Bible. All you need is a little ordinary common understanding, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, where you can understand the truth of God's word. All right, we will quick here for today. Which verse we in now? Which verse? Let me see. Did I finish up that verse? 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his clothes and came in to Pharaoh. So that was just common practice, shaving yourself. It's like if you have an appointment to go before Justin Trudeau, or to meet even with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump, I have an appointment to meet with Donald Trump, even though I don't agree with him, I'm still going to try to look presentable. Could you imagine you go and see the Queen in Buckingham Palace, and you just, I as the sanitation worker, and I just go in my sanitation clothes? No. Or could you imagine you going in for your citizenship and you just go in anyhow, in your dirty clothes? No, man, you have to go respectable. And this is what was happening here with Joseph. Anybody have any question that you'd like to ask before we close up? Praise the Lord. Amen. Most High God, we thank you for your words today. Thank you, Lord God, for the wisdom of God, the knowledge of God. Continue to bless us as we go forward, and let the windows of heaven be open upon the congregation of your people. We ask these favors in the name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. Amen.